Hello everybody, my name's Nick Hart. I'm a professor of respiratory and critical care medicine at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital in London. I'd like to talk to you about optimising ventilator settings and the strategies we use for home ventilation in our patients with COPD. Now, how do we start home mechanical ventilation in COPD? And I know you'll have heard from the other speakers, Stefano Nav, that we are going to have to choose the right patient for the right treatment at the right time. But what does that mean? And I think what we need to understand is the patients we're going to start home mechanical ventilation on. I want to first of all think about patients and in terms of the chronic stable COPD patients. I'm really asking the question, who? So we know from the data published from the German team, and it was published back in 2014, of the types of patients we should be thinking about for home ventilation in COPD. And indeed, this seminal study has very much driven the current guidelines we have, the American Thoracic Society guidelines and European Respiratory Society guidelines. But we're looking at patients with severe COPD and chronic respiratory failure. And that's really important. And when you look at the study, what they did, they looked at patients who were on LTOT and receiving home mechanical ventilation to those who were just on standard treatment and LTOT. And importantly, what they did was drive down CO2. So when we think about optimizing the ventilator, making sure we set the ventilator properly, we must be targeting carbon dioxide. That will be arterial pressure of carbon dioxide from an arterial blood gas, but also transcutaneous carbon dioxide, which we can use for measuring the CO2 overnight. So at 14 days, they were targeting a 20% reduction in CO2. And if the PaCO2 was less than, driving the PaCO2 down to less than 50 millimeters of mercury at 7 days. Now, what that really showed is that at 12 months, there was a significant difference between the LTOT group and the non-invasive ventilation LTOT group. And what we saw was a 0.9 kilopascal difference, which was about a 20% reduction. In this study, it was 19%. And I'll go and talk about hot HMV and look at their data in terms of CO2. So this is all around targeted CO2 reduction, and targeted CO2 reduction as the treatment effect ends up in terms of, in this study, which was all-cause mortality at 1 year at the primary outcome, a significant difference. And that means we are saving more lives. And when you look at the Kaplan-Meier and you look at the absolute risk reduction, the ARR, which was 21% at 12 months, that means we need to treat 5 patients with non-invasive ventilation to prevent 1 death. This is a very clinically effective treatment in a group of patients who have chronic respiratory failure with COPD. These are the patients who are stable, but again, driving the CO2 down, aiming for a 20% reduction within that first year, aiming to make sure that we're reducing the CO2 during setup, and you're actually aiming to get the CO2 down by around 15%. So when you think about the next group of patients, again, thinking about the patient and the treatment and the timing of that, what I'd like to think about is the post-acute COPD patients. So we've looked at the chronic stable patients from the German study. This is the UK study. And again, it's going through that, who is this for? Which patients am I seeing in clinic that are going to really benefit from home mechanical ventilation and home oxygen therapy? So taking patients with a persistent hypercapnia 2 to 4 weeks after an exacerbation requiring non-invasive ventilation. So these patients have got a CO2 that's elevated within the first month after they've suffered a life-threatening exacerbation requiring acute NIV. And so these patients, as you see, they received a standard treatment, COPD treatment, but also the home NIV and the home oxygen therapy. And what you see here is the patients actually received an IPAP of 24 centimetres of water, an EPAP of 4 centimetres of water, with a backup rate of 14, with a prescription of 1 litre per minute. Really important. And what I highlight here, PICO, which is the target population, the intervention, the control and the outcome. But the important to know about the intervention is whether you're delivering the intervention. And what we did within this study, we had a protocol, and that protocol is what we use during NIV setup. And whether we're doing it as an inpatient or ambulatory, we use these protocols in order to standardize setup of care. And we're driving CO2 down and we're driving oxygen up. We're increasing the IPAP by 2 centimetres of water to drive the CO2 down, and we'll train oxygen therapy to maintain those oxygen saturation levels. And we do this using transcutaneous monitoring overnight. And so this is a nurse-led in our unit in terms of a nurse-led titration. And then in outpatients, we'll be doing medical and physiotherapy-led titration as well. So did the treatment work? Well, when you look at this study, what you see here from this table, you have baseline, and then you have setup and baseline against the 12 months. And what you have in the upper is the hot HMV, and what you have lower is the hot. So what we're actually seeing is a mean difference between baseline and setup, whether you're comparing the treatment group with a control group. And then when you look at 12 months, there is a mean difference between the treatment group and the control group. When we look at that in detail, what you see is that setup, there was a 1.1 kilopascal difference in transcutaneous CO2, which is a 14% reduction while we're establishing somebody on non-invasive ventilation. What we saw at 12 months with patients adhering to non-invasive ventilation and using this every night with home oxygen therapy, we saw a 23% reduction. So important to have a target in terms of how we're reducing carbon dioxide. And the reason we've got this reduced carbon dioxide, or we're targeting a CO2 reduction, is because it impacts on outcome. You saw from the German study that they showed a difference in terms of the all-cause mortality and all-cause mortality at 12 months. And just remember, we need to treat 5 patients with chronic stable COPD with chronic respiratory failure to prevent 1 death. What we saw in the hot HMV study was a significant impact in a clinical effectiveness, and the difference of 4.3 months in terms of time to readmission or death compared to 1.4 months time to readmission or death. What does that mean? Well, it means the treatment group had an increased time to readmission or death by 90 days. And in fact, the likelihood of readmission or death was reduced by over 50%. So when we look at the absolute risk reduction at 12 months, you have to treat 6 patients with home oxygen therapy, home mechanical ventilation to prevent 1 readmission or death. It's important to remember that setting the ventilator in a pressure support mode with targeted oxygen, targeted CO2 in terms of transcutaneous CO2 and SpO2 in order to reduce the CO2 will improve and cause the clinical outcome effect. It doesn't just reduce readmission or death, it reduces exacerbation frequency. So we can tell our patients if they use these treatments and we get the CO2 down, you're going to reduce your exacerbation by the 12 months exacerbation risk by 1/3. When you look at 28-day readmission, patients going home are coming back to hospital after their exacerbation. And what we want to do is increase that time or reduce the 28-day readmission rate. And what we saw, if you can add home oxygen therapy with home mechanical ventilation, drive down the CO2, then you'll see a reduction in the 28-day readmission by 2/3. So we only need to treat 4 patients with hot HMV to prevent one readmission at 28 days. That then puts us into an extremely effective therapy. And again, what are we doing? We're taking patients who are hypercapnic. They're persistently hypercapnic following life-threatening exacerbation of COPD that required acute NIV. We're seeing them within 4 weeks. We're setting them up on non-invasive ventilation. We're driving down their carbon dioxide, and we're driving the carbon dioxide by about 15% during setup and 20% by the end of the first year. So this has been put into 2 different guidelines, as I mentioned. That's the European Respiratory Society guidelines and the American Thoracic Society guidelines. And all those guidelines identify how, and the how is targeted CO2 reduction, and importantly the why, to reduce mortality and to increase admission-free survival. So important that we're using CO2 as an important biomarker in terms of improving the clinical outcome for our patients. When we look at where we should start this, you have inpatient setup. In our case, we do ambulatory setup or outpatient setup. But there's also home setup in terms of the ability to manage patients with COPD. And this is data from Marika Duverman. And this is a study that was a single center study, but it was taking COPD patients with stable hypercapnic COPD, similar to the patients you saw in the German study by Thomas Kernlein. Now, what this study did, this actually compared inpatient setup, which was actually done over 7 days, which is significantly longer than we see in our unit, where we normally set patients up over 2 days. But it was a 7-day setup period inpatient, and then it was compared to doing it at the home. And they had transcutaneous CO2 monitoring in the home. And what they found is, and this was a non-inferiority study using CO2, using PaCO2, daytime PaCO2 as the primary outcome. But you see, there was no difference in terms of the CO2 between the groups, in terms of the reduction in CO2 between the groups. So this was really important, that whether this was done in the hospital setting or the home setting, you could actually drive down the CO2. There was no difference between the groups in terms of health-related quality of life. And this was judged by obviously the CCQ and the SRI scores. So important that what we saw here was similar health-related quality of life and similar reductions in CO2. However, we must highlight, and I know the advances in technology will be coming, but transcutaneous CO2 in this study was not necessarily measured in all the patients on a regular basis just because of technical problems with the CO2. And we know the advances within the measurement of transcutaneous CO2 are ongoing, and that will be the next step as we move towards home delivery. In terms of our own service, and what we see here in Isik Su and Shelley Srivastava lead our service, we do a lot of outpatient ambulatory setup now. 40% of our work is done as outpatient, whereas 60% of the work is done as inpatient. And what we see is the outpatient, you're seeing about 30% of the patients. And again, we're driving down the CO2. We're aiming to get the CO2 down. And really importantly, we see about 50% of the patients have a reduction in their CO2 of 0.5 kilopascals at 6 weeks. And then we see the patients regularly, as we all do in our clinical services. So where are we? How are we going to optimize the ventilator settings? What strategy are we going to use? Well, the strategy we're going to use is we always need to make the measurements. Measuring and modifying carbon dioxide improves clinical outcome. It improves admission-free survival, exacerbation frequency, quality of life. So we must ensure that we are targeting CO2. When we're starting the non-invasive ventilation in a pressure support mode with a backup rate of 14, what we actually do is target that CO2 reduction. We want a 15% reduction in the CO2 during setup and a 20% reduction by 12 months. For inpatient ambulatory and home setup, as I said, we use pressure support mode, and we have a titration protocol to reduce the CO2 and increase the SpO2. increase the SpO2 by additional oxygen, and in terms of the CO2, we're increasing the IPAP levels. And so we will start our targeted reduction at 18 centimetres of water in terms of our protocol, and we'll be increasing by 2 centimetres of water. What we can see from our clinical service, but also the work that we did as part of the trial, 24 centimetres of water of IPAP was the median IPAP, and only 4 centimetres of water of EPAP. We follow up patients at 6 weeks, 6 months and 12 months. Depending on the response, we'll see the patients at 3 months as well. It's really important to tell the patients about clinical benefit. And obviously we're driven to drive the CO2 down, but the patient is looking for the clinical benefit to them of reducing readmission and death. And so if the patient uses it for 4 hours a night, for 5 nights per week over that first 12 months, they'll reduce their readmission rate and mortality, and so improve their clinical outcome. There'll also be improvements in their health-related quality of life. I'd like to thank all the teams that I'm very fortunate to work with at the Lane Foss Clinical Respiratory Physiology Research Group. And also, really importantly, the take-home message here is please target carbon dioxide for our patients with COPD. Please target carbon dioxide in terms of modifying the IPAP level in a press sport mode of non-invasive ventilation, driving the CO2 down during setup by about 15%, and by 1 year getting that down to 20%. Thank you all for listening.